Thank you. Thank you all. How's everybody doing? All right, well, thank you for having me here today. Thank you for the meal, and thank you for the butterscotch pie. I don't really get butterscotch pie very often, probably because when my wife and I first got married, we'll be married 30 years come July, but when we first got married, we had family over, and she made butterscotch pie, and unfortunately it didn't set up, so new wife, crying, and I was like, honey, it'll be all right. Here, let me just stick it in the freezer. It'll be all right. But unfortunately, I didn't have butterscotch pie after that because it wasn't all right. No, I'm kidding. But no, it's an honor to be here today. But prior to being elected to auditor in 2015, I served 13 years in Kentucky General Assembly, primarily Boyle and Washington, but right on the end it was Boyle and Casey. So I've been close to this area for some time. You all know some of the names that work with me in the auditor's office. Sarah Beth Gregory is my chief of staff. She does a fantastic job. But when I was, in 2015, I kind of had a David and Goliath race. But in 2019, I want to thank the citizens of Kentucky for giving me an opportunity to continue the great work. But we realized something, that once I was elected in 2019, I actually became currently the oldest serving constitutional officer currently. I'm 53. The next closest constitutional officer is the Secretary of State at 43. So our average is 41, and I really run the average. They all remind me of that. But as you can imagine, as currently the oldest serving constitutional officers, by 10 years, I was getting a little bit down. So the other day I was looking in my mirror, and you know how you do when you're worried and you're sitting there and you're going. And my wife walks by and I said, sweetheart, I look so old and so tired. I could really use a compliment, just kind of bolster me just a little bit. So she looked right at me, married almost 30 years, and she said, at least your eyesight's still good. No, she didn't do that. She didn't do that. But I have the oldest serving currently. We stay so busy. The first thing that I did when I entered the auditor's office in 2015 is I told all the people, we don't target anyone except Kevin. No, I'm kidding. We don't target anyone. We don't give anybody a pass. We just simply follow the data. I think it's important, the auditor's office, even though we're elected as a partisan, I think it's important that we operate the auditor's office in an independent, nonpartisan manner. It's just very important to me, and it should be to the state. So we've done quite a bit since that time. But I've also had the opportunity to travel this entire state. And somewhere along the lines, it was probably about 6 months before the last election, 6 or 7 months before the last election, I was coming back from Pikeville, and I was driving through McGoffin, and they diverted me from a mudslide. That was very nice of them. They diverted me from a mudslide. Unfortunately, they diverted me right into high water. Now, I won't go into the entire story, but somewhere during the night I got separated not only from my car, but also my shoes. So I spent the whole night full suit, tie, wet socks, no shoes. But as you can imagine, what is it one politician said, never waste a crisis. So somewhere along the lines, we ended up in an emergency area. And of course, it was 6 months before an election. So I went around going, hi, Mike Harmon, Kentucky State Auditor. Mike Harmon. Remember, full suit, tie, wet socks, no shoes. Well, I run into this one fellow. He said, hey, come here. I want you to meet my wife. So I go over and I say, hi, Mike Harmon, Kentucky State Auditor. She said, Mike Harmon. Mike Harmon. We've got a Mike Harmon here. And I said, you do? And she said, yeah, he's a mortician. And I looked her right, had a rough night, but looked her right in the eyes. I said, well, that's where we differ. Everybody's dying to see him. No one's dying to see the auditor. So, needless to say, there is some truth to that. And that's why I also like to put a little bit of humor when I come, because when you start talking auditing, people are either scared and trying to hit the door like Kevin was, or no, I'm kidding, or they or they fall asleep. People start nodding off, and so it's kind of concerning. So you want to put a little humor in there with us. But, you know, we have worked very diligently, and as it was mentioned earlier, we know that our counties and our state, you know, they're struggling financially. This pension woes is just really pulling everybody down, and even for like our office, it's just very expensive. And I actually said as auditor, I sat on Public Pension Oversight Board. Now I recuse myself so that I don't actually vote on anything except for a quorum, primarily because, well, we actually audit the retirement systems. Once every 5 years we're statutorily required to audit them. But we understand that the counties are struggling, we're struggling. But we try to look at ways to try to help save money. So one of the things I had, as I think I said earlier, 13 years in the Kentucky General Assembly. Prior to becoming auditor, I was in the Kentucky House. And so I had a lot of background. Sarah Beth Greger, my chief of staff, had 2 years in the House, 2 years in the Senate. So we try to look at ways to help find bills that help both county and state to be efficient, effective, and ethical. And one of the bills that we came up with, staff worked on, was Senate Bill 144. We passed that in 2018. And what that bill does, we call it our AUP bill, and AUP stands for Agreed Upon Procedures. But your sheriffs and your county clerks every year have to have a financial statement audit, and we do the financial statement audit. But we thought, is there a way to both kind of reward them and also save money? And so we came up with the AUP bill, and what it says is this. It says that if you have a clean audit, now you can have an exit, you know, some comments on the exit, you just can't have anything on a report, on your report itself. If you have a clean audit the year before, then you can apply for what's known as agreed upon procedure. It's still very transparent, but it has some cost savings to it because it doesn't take as much detail to do it. So initially we conservatively estimated that that bill, Senate Bill 144, would save about 25 to 50%. We thought, you know, if we could save the county 25 to 50% on their county clerks or their county sheriffs audits, that would be a good thing. It also gives them an incentive in case if there's one or two small things that they, you know, want to try to help to get that cleaned up. And it's good for us too because it allows us to take auditors off low-risk audits and put them on more high-risk audits. So we initially thought it'd be about 25 to 50%. Well, we wrote out our first batch of agreed-upon procedures, both for county clerks and for sheriffs. Got to get more sheriffs to apply, but the ones that we did, well, it's not only 25 to 50%, it's actually going to be 60% plus. Now, of the county clerks that we looked at, there was an average savings of about 62%. Now that sounds pretty good. The dollar amount for them, the average savings for your county clerks was about $5,600. Now your average savings for your sheriffs is actually higher. We only had 16 of 19, we only had 16 sheriffs, well 19 sheriffs apply, we had 16 of them done at the time we took these numbers. But of those 16 of 19 sheriffs that applied for and was approved for an AUP, their savings was actually 67% on the cost of their audit, and the average savings was about $6,700. So it worked out well. And so we're always looking for ways to do that. But also, as I said earlier, one of the things that we do is I tell all our auditors we don't target anyone, we don't give anybody a pass, we just simply follow the data. We even came up with these little button that says follow the data. Now I will assure you we spent no taxpayer dollars in the creation of these. Myself and staff, and my communications directors here, staff, we all chipped in and we bought these. So, but that's our philosophy. And we've taken that philosophy and we've utilized it on everything. We do, you know, around 600 audits per year, which is a lot. Your sheriffs, your county clerks, your fiscal courts. Now going back to the AUP bill, the reason your fiscal courts can't actually apply for that is most of your fiscal courts will actually carry debt. And if you carry debt, your debtor is going to, or your bond company is going to want to make sure you have a full financial statement audit every year. So that's why they really can't apply for it. But we do that, and we've actually done, now a lot of it's just our standard financial statement audits, but we also do what's known as special exams. Now, some of the special exams we've done, we did a special exam on AOC. And now, that's not the interesting young lady in D.C., that's the administrative office of the courts, and we're thankful. Chief Justice John Minton invited us in, and but we did have, they had never had, AOC had never had an external audit, an external review. Now, they had some internal stuff, but they'd never had an external audit. If I recall correctly, I think we had 20 findings. Probably some of the most, one of the ones that kind of like, we're like, oh my. They had actually leased space for one of their justices from a company, and we got to look, and that company just happened to be owned by his two sons. And we got to look a little further, and it just happened to be 3 times higher than the next closest bid. So as you can imagine, that sends off flags off. And then after we released our report, they were very, like I said, very kind, invited us in. They said, well, we didn't actually close on the 3 times as much one, and we said, well, it was the same one. Oh yeah, it was the same one. Well, how much more did you pay? They said, well, it was only twice as much. So I don't know, but anyway, but we appreciate them inviting me, and they have actually taken, they haven't embraced everything, but they've embraced the majority of many of our recommendations and are moving forward in one way or the other. So we are pleased that we've been able to do that. We also did an audit of Kentucky Wired. That was well, it started out, and to be honest with you, if they had stayed with Congressman Rogers' original ideal of doing it in the East, it would probably already been done. But they started, Congressman Rogers, wonderful, was able to appropriate approximately, they had a grant for like $24 million upon the completion of this particular network. But so then they went to the House and the Senate, and they appropriated another $30 million. And it was supposed to be a public-private partnership prior to the passage of the public P3, a public-private partnership legislation. Unfortunately, Governor Steve Beshear, not current Beshear, on the way out the door, flipped the script on the Kentucky taxpayers, and instead of that burden being on the private partner for pole attachments and for financing everything, the previous Governor Beshear, Steve Beshear, flipped the script on the Kentucky taxpayers and took us from a $30 million obligation to a $1.5 billion with a B obligation on something that is still struggling. They're not sure. They continue to come back for availability, what they call availability payments, making what they call availability payments on something that is not actually, with the exception of a few that have gone online, not available and hasn't been available for a couple of years, even though we as a state and you as taxpayers have been paying these availability payments. So phase 2, of course, in phase 1 of that particular audit, we showed that not only did they have several warnings, but they also knew that in likelihood they were basing their payment stream to make these payments on the bonds. 45% of it they knew that they probably weren't going to have, because part of it was connecting your schools to the high-speed internet through using their lines, and they were going to divert that from paying whoever they were paying, AT&T or whoever, over to this particular one. Well, they already knew that that had to be done by competitive bidding. They had warnings to the effect, and yet they still moved forward with it. So anyway, if we don't learn anything else, we need to learn that when we do public-private partnerships in the future, we need to not repeat that particular situation. In phase 2, we actually just released, it was more just a letter, but phase 2, an additional investigation. Not only did we find everything that I already told you, and there's a whole lot more. If you ever want to go to auditor.ky.gov and having trouble sleeping at night, pull that up and be sure to read that. But no, it's got some good information. But in phase 2, not only did we ignore the warnings I told you about, we also brought in engineers and attorneys, paid them $1.36 million so that we could ignore those warnings too. They warned us as well. So not only did we ignore warnings, we also paid people to get stuff to ignore their warnings. But from a standpoint, we do stay very busy. Like I said, AOC, Kentucky Wired, we did an audit of the Kentucky Horse Park. The very first audit, one of the very first audits, really kind of showed, my bipartisan nature. One of the very first audits that we did when I was first elected. I hadn't even been sworn in yet. In 2015, I was walking through the parking lot. One of my colleagues, who was the opposite side of the aisle at the time, he since switched, but the opposite side of the aisle, Denny Butler, comes up to me and he is mad as fire. And I thought, is he mad at me? But he wasn't mad at me, but he was mad at fire because the previous auditor refused to audit the CLEP fund, the Kentucky Law Enforcement Foundation Program Fund. And even the speaker at the time, Stumbo, he and his people, they didn't want to have anything to do with it or try to compel it. So he said, would you audit that? And I was like, well, tell me about it. And he told me a little bit about it, and I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. We'll probably audit it. And we did. We kind of expanded a little bit the DOCJT, Department of Criminal Justice Training, and we had several findings in there. We made some recommendations, and they were able to do it. So we were very pleased with that as well. Did an audit of the University of Louisville Foundation and the University of Louisville. That one was a little bit open previously, but they couldn't get it done. So literally before I got elected, after I got elected, the day I was sworn in, the press was all calling, saying, are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? Are you going to finish? Like, let me get in there and take a look. My biggest concern was, we put on our sign state auditor, but really it's auditor of public accounts. And so my concern was, well, the University of Louisville Foundation is technically a private foundation. So I wanted to get in there and find out whether or not, we had, audited a private foundation. But as it turned out, they had received money through Bucks for Brains, and there was also a judicial ruling. So we made a decision we were going to do it, and in the process of making that decision, we also reached out to the chairman, and the chairman actually sent us a letter asking us to complete it. So we did it, and there were several findings there. I encourage you to go on there. And we weren't, just because I'm a UK fan, we weren't targeting Louisville. I'm teasing, but I am a UK fan. I'm not teasing about that. But so anyway, but they have used that as a roadmap, and we appreciate them. And they have used, University of Louisville has used that as a roadmap to try to get back on track. They had some, other concerns. Like I said, we keep plugging, we keep moving forward. I thank you all so much. From a standpoint, if you ever have concerns about Kevin, now we appreciate Kevin so much. And I've just met the man, It's like we've been brothers for years. Brothers in Christ, anyway. But if you have any concerns about waste, fraud, or abuse, you can go to auditor.ky.gov. We've also got a tips line, 1-800-KY-ALERT. And once again, thank you all so very much for inviting me into your home, feeding me, give me the opportunity to tell a few jokes. That's always, that's just, I didn't tell you actually what my major was. I actually graduated with a triple major in math, statistics, and theater. And I tell everybody I tell everybody that's why, with that major, I know the math, I really do. I know the statistics, I really do. But with the theater major, if I don't, I just act like I do. So, thank you all. God bless. We appreciate you. Thank you, Ted. Appreciate it.